afternoon, everybody, or good evening from Australia, where it's almost midnight. I'll spend the next 20 minutes taking you through our company, BPC. Many of you might be familiar with BPC already, how do we move the slides?
Right, the slides, Ethan, on the button on the slides, and you can click next.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I can't. That's not here. Sorry, this is embarrassing. Maybe I'll get you to do it for me.
Yeah.
All right. If you could go over to the next one, please, and the next one. Thank you. So BPC. For those people who followed the company for a long time, until 6 months ago, if I was talking to you about BPC, I'd be talking to you about a project in the Bahamas, a large offshore exploration project in the Bahamas. But over the last 9 months, really, the management team of BPC has set about to transform the business. We've done that by both merging with and acquiring other assets in complementary jurisdictions. I'll talk through them each in some detail as I go, but we have assets and projects in the Bahamas, in Trinidad and Tobago, in Suriname, and in Uruguay. And in the event, we've managed to transform ourselves into a full cycle E&P company. What do I mean by that? I mean we're a company where we have a range of assets in multiple jurisdictions, as indicated on that map. We have a range of assets of different maturities and different play types. Within that, we have production generating cash. We have a very clear and near-term plan to improve and grow production. And then we have what we would call high-impact exploration prospects, most notably a transformational well in the Bahamas, which is due to spud by the end of this year, and which I will talk about in some detail. Over on the next slide. In terms of the strategy, it's very clear and it's very simple. The strategy of the company is built on 2 pillars. The first is production and cash flow, and the second is to use that production and cash flow to enable us to go after big ticket exploration upside. So the value of the company is underpinned by the stable production, growing production and cash flow, and the upside we offer to investors comes from the big ticket exploration projects we're going after. There are many other benefits of a portfolio approach. There are multiple value catalysts at any time. You can make better use of staff. You have much greater access to capital. You can spread technical risk. But it's a simple and clear strategy that we've set about enacting over the last, as I mentioned, 9 months. And we're both very pleased with how we've gone. We still have quite a bit to do. But certainly everybody who works at BPC is very, very excited about the immediate future of the company. On the next slide, please. Can you move over to the next slide, please?
The one we're at the moment is the leadership with track records.
Yes. Okay. Well, I can't see it on my screen. I think there must be a limitation on the net at the moment. Anyway, leadership with track record. Essentially, for many people who follow the company, you're very familiar with Simon Potter, the CEO, and perhaps familiar with me. But what few people realize is that BPC is a lot more than the Simon and Eitan show. We have a very deep pool of management in the company. We have a large operating staff base in the company as well. And on this slide, I've endeavored to illustrate some of the people. Obviously, if you go to our website, you can see the depth of talent. And just a few points I'd like to make about this, because we would really like to start introducing to the market more of the people that make up BPC. First is that I think it's fair to say that for a company of our size, we punch well above our weight in terms of the people we have working in the company. We have people with a lot of big oil company experience, but we're very entrepreneurial. We treat this company like our own. We treat shareholders' money as if it's our own. We have all worked together in various contexts for a long period of time. Some of us worked together in Australia more than a decade ago. We've worked in big companies, small companies, in multiple jurisdictions around the world. And the third thing, which I think is most relevant to a forum like this, we've made money for shareholders. We have a history of making money for shareholders, not once, not twice, but many times in different companies. And that's what we hope to do again with BPC. If you could switch over to slide 6, thank you. Before I get into a bit more detail around the assets, some highlights, corporate summary highlights of the company. We are around about £100 million now. I would highlight the fact that board and management are fairly heavily invested in this company. Me personally, some of my fellow board members and management, we own about 10% in total. And we've been very active. Most recently, we did a successful capital raising in October. Before that, we announced our rig. These are all things that you can read later. But the point being that we are active, and we're moving forward, and we are growing. Over onto the assets, please, onto page 8. Thanks. So the flagship asset of BPC is our project in the Bahamas. People who've followed the company for a while will be very familiar. We first picked up these assets 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago now. In the space of 10 years, we have done a huge amount of technical work. We've spent more than $110 million to date. And everything we have done has been to prove up the prospect and to get the prospect to a point where it's capable of being drilled. And we're now right on the cusp of drilling. The one thing I would point out in relation to this project and on this map, which I'm not sure is something that many people appreciate. The project location is in a deep water channel of water, and it's actually very far away from most of the inhabited islands of the Bahamas. It's proximate to the Cuban border, about 40 kilometers away from Cuba. So it benefits from being actually quite remote and in a fairly busy shipping lane. So it's away from inhabited islands of the Bahamas, but it's still within a day or two of most of the infrastructure and services you need in the Gulf of Mexico. And that leads us to Perseverance 1. So the well that we are planning to drill before the end of this year is called Perseverance 1. That is the big news item that everybody is looking forward to. If you could move on to number 9, please. I'm assuming everyone can see slide 9, but I cannot. For the well in the Bahamas, for Perseverance 1, that well is going to be drilled in the B North structure. There are technical reasons which one could talk to for hours about why we've chosen that particular location, but the important thing is it is a very large prospect. So the pre-drill estimate, P50 pre-drill estimate for that well is 0.7 billion barrels, upside of 1.4 billion barrels. And if that well comes in, then it will unlock technically the whole of the B structure, which has a most likely recoverable resource of north of 2 billion barrels. So like we've been saying for 10 years, this is huge. This is a Middle East scale prospect. And it is the sort of thing that obviously from our point of view is a company making prospect. It is massively significant to the nation of the Bahamas, but it is also very relevant to most of the large oil companies out there. And so we feel that people are watching what we are planning to do very closely. If you move over onto the next page, we are progressing at pace now. So we were looking to drill this well in March, April of this year. We had done most of the work to get ourselves ready for that. And unfortunately, owing to the pandemic, we were unable to proceed, and we deferred the drilling of the well to the end of this year. Over the last couple of months, we've really, as it's become clear that we will be able to proceed with drilling, we've put the foot on the gas, as it were, and we are gathering momentum. So we have confirmed the drill ship. The drill ship in question is the Stena Ice Max. It will be arriving on location around the 15th of December, and the spud of the well should be shortly after that. We have a drilling team in place. The drilling team is operating out of Houston. They are a dedicated team, and they are solely focused on the drilling of this well, and the well should take between 45 and 60 days to drill. We have got all of the long lead items underway, paid for, warehoused. We've got service companies engaged, Baker Hughes, Halliburton. Recently we announced that we finalized the insurance policy. The government of the Bahamas have granted us a force majeure extension to cover the extra time into 2021 that will be needed to complete the drilling program. And most significantly, we have our environmental authorization approved and in place. So really, everything is ready to go. We have also spent, as you would expect, quite a bit of time working with Stena and with all of our major contractors to make sure that we have very robust COVID-19 operating strategies and protocols in place. So really, the whole package is now fully ready to go. We're expecting this well to spud before the end of the year. As I said, 45 to 60-day drill program. And really, we'll know what we have early in the new year. And believe me, there's no one more than the people who work in BPC who are anxious after years of working at this to see what we have. If you flick over onto the next page, please. It's not just us who are anxious to see what we have. On this page, you will see that we are now routinely featured. There are various commentators who, and industry consultants, etc., who look at which are the big wells coming up, which are the wells to watch. And we're pretty much on the list now. We're also one of the very few big wells that will be drilled by a non-major. So as I said the last time I spoke, as I'll say again, watch this space. We have a big well coming up at the end of this year, and that's something that everyone will be looking forward to. Moving over onto the next page, just very briefly, earlier on in this year, we were successful in a licensing bid in Uruguay. This is our second, what we might call, high-impact exploration prospect. It's very early stage. We expect the license to be formalized before the end of the year, at which point we can start the initial work. It's a 4-year initial term with very low work commitments, no drilling obligation. We've previously said we expect we'll have to spend about $800,000 over the first 4 years. Question is, why did we do this? It's very simple. It's a big possible resource, estimated north of 1 billion barrels. It's analogous to the big discoveries that have been evaluated and are presently being developed offshore Guyana and Suriname. And to us, it looked very, very similar to how the Bahamas looked 10 years ago. It's technically robust. It has a modest work commitment. It's very big. There's historic well data. There's regional seismic available. So we thought this was a good follow-on project for us as we have managed to mature the Bahamas project to the point of drilling. If you could move over onto the next slide. We then come to talking about Trinidad and Tobago. So again, people who follow the company will be aware that earlier this year we merged with a company called Columbus Energy Resources, and Columbus had a portfolio of assets in Trinidad and Tobago. And the map that you see in front of you will be shows where those assets are. It's a portfolio that's made up of both producing assets at an appraisal and development stage, and then an exploration portfolio. And the strategy we have in Trinidad and Tobago is very simple. The first point is to build profitable production. We have an existing production base, and we are going to build profitable production. The second part is to enhance that production, and then the third part is to add production. And the adding of production, there are some near-term appraisal prospects, and then there's in the medium-term exploration. So I might just touch on each of those in turn. If you flick over to the next page, please. Yes, thank you. In terms of building profitable production, currently the 5 producing fields we have in Trinidad are averaging around 400 to 450 barrels per day. And we've very clearly set out a target that as a baseline, we want 500 barrels a day, stabilized and reliable by the end of this year. That is a target we've had ownership of Columbus under our management now for about 8 weeks. We've got after this very quickly, and we are doing a lot of work. We've increased the number of workovers, well interventions. We have new people on the ground, and everything we are doing is focused in the first instance on building this profitable production. It's a bit too soon to be providing any solid guidance, but we're confident that we'll be able to achieve our objective in this respect. Over onto the next slide, please. The second part when it comes to production is enhancing the production, maximizing the profitable production. And there we have what we're calling self-help initiatives. We have a range of self-help initiatives to improve production. Some of those have been spoken about quite a lot in the public domain. Enhanced oil recovery techniques, such as CO2 injection, water flooding, field extensions. They're all listed on that slide. But again, it's pretty clear. We think through diligent application of these things, and this is onshore work. This is lots of production wells that all have to be managed effectively. But through diligent application of these production maximization techniques, we're looking to something like a 20 to 35% uplift in the baseline production. So that's the maximizing the production. And then if you go on to the next slide, the third limb of the strategy is adding production. Now, how do we add production? Well, the first one, and the thing that most people who followed Columbus before we merged and who still follow the company would be interested in, is the status of the Saffron project. So earlier this year, under Columbus's management, they made a discovery at Saffron with the Saffron 1 well. And so we are now actively planning for the Saffron 2 well, which will be the next, the appraisal well in that program. That is likely to be drilled by the end of this year, if not early next year. It's depending on a couple of permitting issues and a bit more planning. But essentially, there you can see what we're expecting from Saffron. If that is a success, and if we can bring that project into development as we hope, then we're looking at a program that could see 20 wells drilled over time, and that could build to a mid-case peak of about 4,000 barrels a day. That will take some time to do, but this is a material prospect for us, a material project, and it's getting full attention of the team in Trinidad and Tobago. And over and above moving that project forward, there is a significant acreage position in the southwest peninsula of Trinidad, very big prospect, and we believe that a bit of old-fashioned exploration work is required there. we are looking at reinterpreting some existing 3D seismic and a series of other technical steps to really figure out the right way to go about exploration in that part. That's a sort of a medium-term prospect. The other thing I will mention is we have, and I think we've announced this publicly, we have engaged a competent person to undertake a competent person report across the portfolio. Because these were all different assets in different buckets, there's never really been a standardized resource statement, resource and reserve statement for the portfolio. So we've initiated that, and we expect to have the results from that prior to the year end as well. And moving then over onto our final slide, our final asset is in Suriname. So this was a new license from late 2019 in the Columbus portfolio. Essentially, it's a license in an existing oil field. We have to do an extended well test, and if that is successful, we can roll that out. Again, we're looking there that if the tests are successful, about 500 barrels per day by the end of 2021. We expect that to get underway in the first half of next year. So we're going through the final planning and permitting arrangements on that project as well. If you can flick over onto page 18. Thank you. As we take BPC forward, as we grow the business, as we start operating in more jurisdictions, obviously ESG is a big part of our business, and we really are taking it very seriously. We've recruited people, we're making an investment in senior personnel, and rather than just sort of putting up slides with lots of words, we've begun a very detailed company-wide process to develop ESG policies and practices that mean something, that can be adopted throughout the company, and that's a core priority for us over the next 12 months. We expect to have our first comprehensive ESG report during the course of next year as well. Over on the next slide, I guess this is what you would call the money slide, and it's the area that I suspect many of the people on this conference call would be most interested in. First thing to say is we as a company have had a very, very clear strategy for the better part of 2 years now as to how we are going to fund our business. The thing that we've tried to communicate is that when you come to drilling a big offshore well, it's a very variable sum. You do your best estimates, and our best estimate is that the well is going to cost somewhere between $21 to $25 million. But then there are all sorts of contingencies that can arise. We've identified up to $5 million of contingencies. So this well could cost anywhere from $21 to $30 million. And really, the problem you have is you don't really know what it's going to be until you get there, because you find things out as you're drilling. You pay the drilling rig on a day rate basis. And so as you drill further, you either go well and it takes less time and you spend less money, or things come up, you need to do more work, etc. So the two ways you can approach funding. Option one, you raise as much money as you possibly can on whatever terms you can, and you overfund yourself. But then you run the risk that you have diluted shareholders unnecessarily and you are overfunded. And we adopted a different strategy. The strategy we adopted was to raise money in a measured way, to try and have multiple sources of funding, and to try and have that funding arranged in a way where we have a lot of flexibility. If we need the money, we can draw it down when we need it, and we can incur the dilution at that point. But if we don't need it, if during the course of drilling we don't need it, we don't need to draw that money, and we don't need to suffer the dilution. It's always a balance between certainty, cost, and dilution. And we've tried as a management team to come up with a balanced approach, which I have to say we're quite proud of and seems to be working. We have so far managed to raise a fair amount of cash, and on that table You will see at the moment we're sitting at around $23 million. We had 11 million at the half year, and we did our placing recently. Obviously, we're spending money every day at the moment as we start paying for equipment and services and what have you to do with the rig. But the main thing is that we have a line of sight to north of $40 million of funding. And that is comprised of several pieces. The most important piece at the moment, and we put out an RNS on it this morning, was our conditional convertible note. So more than a year ago, we put in place a structure with a group of Australian investors who, I might say, were the investors who originally backed companies that myself and Simon and Nathan had all worked at, and they'd done very well from those companies. And they put up a commitment to a convertible note. It was subject to a whole bunch of conditions. It's a convertible note, so it's expensive funding, but it's there if we need it through the course of drilling. We don't want to draw that money just yet, because to draw it means we start paying interest on it. But we have been keeping it, and obviously when coronavirus happened, we had to reschedule it towards the end of the year. And now that we have certainty of when we will be starting the well, we reached an agreement with the providers, which was announced today, that we will reschedule the date for satisfaction of conditions precedent and drawdown of the funds under that note to basically when we start drilling the well. In addition, we have lots of other places we can go for money if we need it. I mean, we have production now in Trinidad and Tobago. If the production increases as we expect, if the oil price rebounds in any way, that becomes surplus cash that we can use elsewhere in the business. We continue to have farm out discussions. This is something that's been going on for years. I have spoken about this many times before, and I can already I can imagine there are many people who say, yeah, we'll believe it when we see it. But this is a big well. This is of interest to all the majors in the industry. We obviously had wanted to get a farm out done by the time we spud. That time is fast approaching. If that doesn't happen, if this well comes in, it will be of interest to every major company in the industry. We also have drill for equity type arrangements. I didn't mention earlier, but part of the arrangement we have with Stena Drilling is they have an option which they can exercise if they wish before the beginning of December to essentially swap a part of their drilling fee for equity in the company, another basically source of funding. So as a company goes, we are very pleased with how our funding strategy has matured. We are continually seeking ways to improve it, to improve the cost of our funding, and to achieve the best possible outcome for our shareholders. And then moving over onto the next page, please, the timeline. So if you had been talking to me 9 months ago, all I would have presented to you was the first line here, the Perseverance 1 activity. And that remains, as I say, the flagship activity of the company. The well will be spud by the end of the year, and then a result early in the following year. And that then will lead to discussions on Perseverance 2. But then in addition, beyond that, we now have a considerable range of things going on in the company and a considerable sources of news. We talked earlier about the Saffron appraisal well. That will then lead to conversations around Saffron development. We've got the production enhancement activities going on across Trinidad. We've got the Webinar Z license, extended well tests and then development in Suriname. And as I mentioned earlier, the early stages of what we do in Uruguay. So a busy slate of activity, lots of news, and lots of opportunities to create value in this company. And I would say that we've managed to do all of this essentially since March of this year. So despite COVID, despite all the difficulties in operating, we've managed to, I would suggest, pretty dramatically transform this company. If I can move then over to the very last slide, We are big believers in being accountable to shareholders and providing clear, transparent goals. You can hold us accountable, you can measure them, and you can see how well we've done against them. And so perhaps not something that too many companies of our size or in our industry do, but we've been very clear about what we're out to achieve. I've touched on various parts of these throughout the course of this presentation, but we're looking at stabilizing production at about 500 barrels per day by the end of this year, and then growing that through the course of next year to 2,500 barrels per day. That translates into net revenues, and that translates into cash flows. As I mentioned, we're doing a company-wide CPR, and we have a goal of seeing 1 million barrels net 2P by the end of this year, and then again growing that materially through the course of next year as we do all of our work. And then obviously exploration activity. We will get Perseverance 1 drilled. We'll start working on what comes next in the Bahamas. We will get the Saffron well drilled. We will start working on what comes next in the Saffron development. So those are the things that we've set our stall out. We're very clear. These are the things we're going to do. These are the things we are going to achieve. And these are the ways that the shareholders can measure how we've gone. If we can deliver all of what is on that slide, then BPC will be a company that is much more valuable than it is today. And the team of people at BPC who are doing this are all very focused, we're all very committed, and we're all very incentivized to do it. So exciting times ahead for our company. And I think I apologize again, it's been a technical nightmare. I've only been able to see about half of the slides, and so I apologize for not, but I hope I've managed to convey what I wanted to convey.
No problem, Ethan. We've got a few questions here.
Yes.
We've got some comments here on a great presentation. There have been, and I know you have touched on it a number of times on the Saffron projects. We've had a couple of questions in there about the timeline. I know there was a slide on that. We've also had questions in here about a CPR report, yes, on Saffron. So it seems to be quite a lot of focus there. So maybe we've only got a few minutes left, but a little bit more details on that project. That seems to be of interest to investors.
Yes, well, no. I mean, Saffron is on track. So the CPR that we are working on at the moment will cover the Saffron project, obviously. We are planning to drill Saffron 2. Like I say, on the activity timeline slide, it shows by the end of this year. It might be early next year. And really, that's just a function of permitting. So we're in the final phases of well design, project design, permitting applications, etc. It was a project, like I mentioned, we inherited when we acquired or merged with Columbus. It was their flagship project. It is one of our flagship projects, and it is progressing at all pace. But that well will get drilled early next year.
Fantastic. So we've got one here in regards to the Seadrill rig commitments in March of this year. Any more details on that? We've been asked.
Well, we were because coronavirus is the short answer. We were all ready to go, and then the market literally fell apart. Rig contracts everywhere got cancelled. All the rig companies went into a tailspin, and ultimately, when we decided we were going to delay our well from March through to the end of this year, that meant that we had the opportunity to go back to the market. Now, fortunately for us, the market for rigs had at that stage, contracts were being cancelled everywhere. We had a contract. We were able to actually put it out, and in the end, as we announced at the time, we were able to get a rig price that was about 15% lower than the previous price we'd had with Seadrill for a rig of comparable, if not better, standard. I mean, the Ice Max is probably one of the best rigs in the world, and so it's not that anything particular happened with the Seadrill rig. It's that our schedule changed, we were able to recontract and we were able to get a much better deal elsewhere.
Fantastic, thank you. So I think we're able to squeeze in one last question here, and this is from Andrew Rossi. Now, Issa, I don't know how you're going to be able to answer this, but maybe you could give some sort of indication of the type of project. But Andrew's asked, you want to acquire one more high-impact project. Do you have one in mind? Now, I'm sure you can't say if you do.
Look, we've made no secret about the fact that we would like to continue growing. We would like to grow both limbs of the business, production and exploration. We are actively monitoring all sorts of things, but we have our hands pretty full at the moment as well. And so if what Columbus showed is we're capable of acting quickly, and we're capable of doing things almost counter-cyclically. While nobody else in the industry is doing anything, we've been doing lots of stuff. And we're able to be opportunistic. So if the right opportunity were to come along, who knows? But right at the moment, we have our hands full. We have a lot of stuff on the go. And, really, we are 9 weeks away from spud in the Bahamas. And that really is the focus at the moment. Can I answer one quick question? Because I saw someone was asking, how am I going to get permission to leave Australia? This is correct. Every Australian citizens are not allowed to leave Australia. The exception is if you're ordinarily resident overseas. And for the last 7 years, I've been ordinarily resident in the Bahamas. So whilst I got stuck in Australia at the start of coronavirus, I actually do have a permit to leave, as do the other members of our staff who are here. So we will all be decamping to the Bahamas as needed before spud of the well.
Fantastic. I don't think we're going to have time for...
Oh, that's okay.
Unfortunately, Ethan. But Ethan, thank you very much.